Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tertulia for Authors Office Hours. I'm Linda Hammes, one of Tertulia's co-founders and your host for Office Hours, which, as a reminder, is open to all authors and aspiring authors. So feel free to bring a friend. I'm especially excited about today's conversation because we are tackling one of the biggest and often the most confusing questions that writers face today. Should you self-publish or traditionally publish? And spoiler alert, the answer is it depends a lot. Today, we are very lucky to have someone here to talk about this with us who has truly seen this from every angle as an agent for years, as an author herself, and as somebody who spends a great deal of time demystifying publishing for authors. Kate McKean, allow me to welcome her. Kate McKean has been a literary agent for nearly 20 years. She's worked closely with authors across genres and across stages of their careers. She's the author of Right Through It, An Insider's Guide to Publishing. Highly recommend. And she has a picture book coming out on Tuesday called Pay Attention to Me. There it is. So, for all of you who have kids or all of you children's book authors on the line, we'll send around a link so you can get her book, pre-order that book over the weekend from our bookstore. And some of you may already know Kate from her newsletter, Agents and Books. And she has very honest and very practical takes, so highly recommend that you follow her. Talks about navigating fear in the publishing process, talks about how promotion actually works versus myths. So again, welcome Kate for joining us today. You can drop your questions in the chat if you like, but please hold your raising your hand to ask a question till the end. All
Great.
right.
So glad to be here.
Hi, Kate.
Hi.
Welcome to Office Hours. I'm going to kick it off with a big picture question. You've been in publishing almost 20 years. What feels different today, starkly different in the industry now than when you started?
When I started, you couldn't email a manuscript to an editor. So there's that one thing that kind of blows my mind. We literally printed them out and put them into boxes and messengered them around town.
Wow.
But very quickly after I started as a full-time agent, we were able to email things. Um, Obviously, ebooks have changed a lot of things. Right now, I think there's just a lot more access to everybody. There's more access for authors to talk to other authors. There's more access for authors to talk to agents and editors and publishers and to share information. Like we just didn't have Twitter 25 years ago or whatever. So I think that has greatly increased authors' knowledge about the whole process, which is wonderful. I think query letters are better now than they were 10, 15 years ago, for sure. Um, Manuscripts might be better. I don't know. Well, I think books are first time books or draft books are all the same kind of good and bad at the same time. And that also has given a lot of room for misinformation to spread. So, good and bad. But I think that right now people have more access to information than they ever did about all kinds of publishing.
What is something that actually hasn't changed, or something that people think has changed and it hasn't, that is just still true today?
Nobody knows how to sell a book. Guess what? Nobody knows how to sell a book. And that the only way to sell a book, the only reliable way to sell a book is to have a pretty good one that someone liked reading and then wants to tell their friend about. Because,
Word of
you could,
mouth.
right. And as an author going out and trying to sell your book, you, I know that, I mean, I was like, what are the best things? How many times do we post? Like all these like kind of things. But I think the answer is to turn it around and think about how you buy books. How did you buy the last book you bought? Who told you about it? Where'd you hear about it? What made you pick it up? What made you pick it up versus this one over that one? Like, what made you buy it versus get it at the library? Like, and you'll know that that's different for every book you've picked up, and so that's the thing that I don't like. We don't have the data that people think we should because I can post a book on Instagram and 3 weeks later you can go buy it on Tertulia or on a store. And there's no direct link from that, but you just saw it on my Instagram. So,
Mhm.
but also it's like there isn't any other specific way. There isn't say post at these times, this many times, get on this list, go on this show. Like there isn't a formula.
There's
And
no
so
portal.
Yeah, so no one's hiding it from you, and the publishers aren't hiding it from anyone. It just is different for every single book every time.
Okay. That's what makes it so challenging and fun. When writers come to you, and maybe through querying, maybe just socially, you're in the mix at a lot of events, people write into you as a thought leader, and they ask, should I self-publish or should I traditionally publish? How do you start answering that?
Honestly, the first thing I'll ask is what they're writing, because there are certain genres that work better in self-publishing than others. And like who their audience is, not just, like, oh, people, marketing gurus or whatever, but like kids versus adults. Like
Hmm.
it is harder to self-publish children's books because the people who are going to buy them are not looking in those venues as much. YA, yes, but middle grade and picture books specifically are very hard to self-publish because when you personally think to go buy one of them, you don't first think of self-publishing. And people want the physical format book for a book like this all the time. You don't really want an ebook for that. So that's one of the things, the first things I ask, or fiction versus nonfiction, because those are also very different pools. And then there's, I know, 800 other questions I would ask.
Yeah. Okay. So what they're writing, who their audience is, makes a lot of sense about ebook versus physical books for specific genres, of course. Could you share some of the misconceptions that you think are still around for self-publishing? And I'd be interested in hearing that from multiple perceptions. One is, what's it going to take for me to self-publish and be successful, whatever that means for that individual? Or misconceptions on the publishing side of what self-publishing brings to the table and how it is competing with traditional publishing. What do you think is sort of some truths that are not well known?
I think that the idea that traditional publishing looks down on self-publishing has is completely gone. Like maybe that was the first blush when everything just started, but now it's like, okay, you did it. That's great. Cool. What was your experience like? It's not a demerit. It's not a like, oh, that, we don't, nobody looks down on it anymore. And I still think people are afraid that if they want to be traditionally published, that traditional publishers will be like, ew. But no, that's not really the case anymore. Um, I think that authors on the author side think, I'll just get it out there. Like if it's just available, then everything else will fall into place, or then I can just it all that's the launching pad to bigger and better things. And that's not really true. I've been thinking about writing about this on my newsletter too, is just like what is the benefit of just having it available? Like there's a personal benefit, absolutely. Like you did it. But what do you want to happen after that? And what's realistic to happen? Um, and I think that there's like a kind of a if you build it, they will come fallacy that is it's really hard to how do you get eyeballs? Like how do we do any of this? And it's hard in traditional as it is in self.
Okay, so I'm hearing you say the stigma is less there than people really think it is in publishing, and that the idea of getting it out there from the author's point of view is a little bit sort of underestimating the effort that's going to be needed to have impact, whatever that impact, however you measure that impact, whether it's selling 100 copies, selling 10,000 copies, or sort of getting some media opportunities out of it, whatever your goal is. Just one quick follow-on question to that. If the stigma isn't there as much, what are your thoughts about the literary prize world and whether they should be opening up more to self-published authors?
Oh gosh, I hadn't really
I know
thought of
that's a
that.
hard question.
Yeah, I wouldn't turn my nose up at it. I can understand why they wouldn't do it though, because it is opening the floodgates.
It's a logistical nightmare.
Yeah. And I think that it's okay if they don't want to. Like I don't think that I don't think that like it makes everything more equitable if they do, because nothing is equitable anyway. And then start your own prize, like so I don't feel like self-published authors are owed that. I think that it would be a logistical nightmare. And that's not a good reason not to do it, but it's a practical reason.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting debate, and personally, I'm for it, and I've had conversations with people on boards of prizes about that and sort of advocating it for it. But I do see how difficult it would be logistically, and there's definitely some things that would have to be put in place for it to work.
Yeah.
I guess time will tell. Okay, thank you for that. So, we talked a little bit about the underestimating what is involved in self-publishing. If you decide to self-publish, either because the timetable is so long in trad publishing, or maybe you're just really having a hard time finding an agent, or your pitching isn't working, and you decide to short circuit that process, or you're going self-publishing from the beginning because you want full creative control. You want full, you think I'm ready for this marketing. What are sort of the trade-offs there from like a distribution standpoint and a marketing standpoint that you can share? And a lot of people on this call, they already know the trade-offs because they are living it every day. If you can think of any authors that have tackled those trade-offs in a creative or impressive way.
Oh goodness. I don't have as deep a knowledge of the indie publishing world from a like this is the person who did it right or found success or did that stuff. I see the things that I'm seeing are the things that everybody else is seeing that, like got picked up or didn't or is everybody's reading and things like that. So I don't have too much to say and kind of addressing the field. Um,
Mhm.
but I think that it really is that doing every job yourself. And that's what you're saying. Everybody knows that kind of already. I'm not sure I have much more insight than that, but really understanding how many jobs that is and being willing to be a beginner for every single one of those jobs is a tough road to hoe because you have to be an expert copy editor, you have to be an expert book designer, and et cetera, et cetera. Everybody knows this. And so if you want to tackle that because you want that control, that's fantastic. Like go do that. And you will just have to learn all those things. I don't really believe that every single tiny bit of the book has to be the absolute pinnacle of perfection every time. Like obviously your book should be copy edited well. But there isn't one perfect title, one perfect cover. There's not just one answer to any of these questions. And so you will get better over time as you learn things. And I think that that is also part of the publishing process, whether it's trad or self. And there isn't as much room for that, unfortunately, in both sectors. It's kind of like, oh, well, this tanked, so I can't do another one. Like unfortunately, that is a prevailing sentiment on all corners. But if you are comfortable being a beginner in all of those things all the time, then self-publishing might be perfect. If you are uncomfortable with that or can't get comfortable with that, it's going to be very hard.
Growth mindset required.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Would you mind sharing a little bit on a personal level? I read a post that you did that really spoke to me. It was like one of the, I think times that made me start really following your newsletter more religiously was the post about your own books. And I'm just curious if you could share with the group how seriously you considered self-publishing after other books, because you've kind of come from the trad world. When they didn't sell, why you decided not to. I think people would really be interested in your personal take on that.
Absolutely. I love to tell everybody how many times I've failed at selling a book myself as a writer. I've had my agent, Michael Barrett, since 2016, 2017, 2018, something like that. And we tried to sell five-ish books before we got a deal for Right Through It. And it was several picture books, a middle grade novel, an adult novel, something else. I can't remember, not any other nonfiction. And it just didn't work. And I I never considered self-publishing any of the picture books because I just would not do that. I don't have the art direction skill. I wouldn't have money to pay an illustrator up front. And I don't think that like a digital forward market even though you can get physical books, is the right place for a picture book. And that's my opinion. And so I was like, well, that's not going to happen. And I also don't really feel like I have to publish every book I write. that the goal for every book is like it must be published for it to be of value. I learned so much from the books I don't publish. Um, and they're still fine. Would I prefer a book deal every single time? Yes, but I'm not going to get that. And the most important thing to me was, I'm sure I am biased from my many years in this side of the industry, is that I wanted to go into a bookstore and touch it on the shelf. And I knew that the only way to do that was traditional publishing because while you can get hardback book in physical copies into individual stores, I knew I would not have the time expertise or energy to go to every bookstore I would want to be in and say, please consign my books. Like that was not a job I was willing to take on. So the trade-off to that is fewer book deals, fewer books that other people can read, and and that then focusing on the ones that have worked in trad publishing. One thing I don't think I put into that post was I can't remember, but I wrote another nonfiction book that we didn't send out to traditional publishers years, oh gosh, 15 years ago, that was about specifically how to get a craft book published, like sewing, knitting, quilting, that kind of stuff. Because I have done um, 30, 40 of those books in my career. And it's a very specific niche of publishing. And I knew a lot about it. And it wasn't really out there. And this was before I had a newsletter and everything. And I fully intended to self-publish that book. I wrote it. I wrote about 50,000 words. I hired my friend to copy edit it. I was going to go through all the stuff. It was probably only going to be digital. And then in the process of actually getting my act together to actually write it, because I had that idea, of course, for several years before I actually did the work, the craft book market went down precipitously. And so I didn't feel responsible. That I didn't feel it was ethical for me to be like, hey, everybody write this kind of book. It's going to be great when I was seeing the market dwindle and to encourage a lot of people to try something to be like, this is the next hot thing, even if it was only implied. I didn't feel like that was a responsible way to use my platform and my voice. And so I never did it. I just took an off ramp and it is just in my files. And I was fully intending to self-publish that because I knew I had the market, the platform for it, and the expertise. And I was going to talk to just one specific niche of people. And that would have been
The
too
book is
small.
evergreen, Kate. Like, can it be dusted off and brought back to life ever?
I mean, maybe because I've actually just been talking to editors that I think that the craft book market is starting to come back up specifically, but I have to rewrite it because it's completely different, like publishing world now. Um, but that was the choice I made at the time, and I knew that traditional publishing would not be right for that because it was too niche.
Have you seen people do anything interesting, or have you considered doing anything with books that don't sell relative to serialization? We're living in a world of gated content tools and Substacks, and even at Tertulia, we're looking at finding ways for writers to further monetize through new forms and formats their books. And I'm curious if you see that growing or changing, especially at a time when it's really, the market is flooded. And so
Mhm.
it's like, could you find, you have an owned audience, could you sell directly to them?
Yeah, I think that it depends on the author and their platform and like how they can actually get directly to the people who are going to want that content. And I think it works much better in nonfiction than fiction. I think that it is hard to serialize fiction and really just as a reader, if I hear about something 3 months after it started, I have to go back and read 3 months worth of serializations on your newsletter or whatever, and that feels daunting, and I don't want to do that. But I would download an ebook or buy a book. So I just I think that you can pivot with a lot of nonfiction and that fiction is harder. And sometimes things just don't work and they can sleep for a while, maybe be revived, or you just write another book.
Mhm. Okay, so very genre dependent. What do you think, how are you seeing authors navigate that like promotional world? And this is actually relevant to the traditionally published authors and the self-published authors in terms of getting their arms around what is required of them as a publisher. So as an author. So let's say they are an introvert and they're
Hmm.
not, I just had a call with an author on this in this group about, public promoting your book as an introvert and how you do that. They're not comfortable with social media for whatever the reason might be. They they just don't have any experience with email marketing and don't, could you share anything that you tell your clients in terms of, obviously the author platform is a much bigger consideration for agents and publishers now, but when the author doesn't come with the platform or doesn't know how to channel the platform, what do you do with them? How do you help them? What do you tell them?
I I would explore them where they are comfortable. Like you, if you want to sell a book, then you have to interact with the outside world in some way because it is not if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
You can pay somebody to do that for you if that's in your budget, but it is not often. And so there is this chasm between I wrote it and someone needs to know about it. And I think there are a lot of bridges over that. And they can be social media and that, but they could also be um, smaller groups that are easier to manage, things like this, or other writers' affinity groups or um, in person or online ways to not, you're not just selling your book. You're not saying buy, buy, buy. You're joining a community. So where is that community? Is it the Horror Writers of America, where you can go to a small chapter meeting once a year and make a couple friends and it slowly builds? Because then you'd have to get used to the idea that it would be a slow build. But I would talk to them and say, well, what do you like to do? Do you draw? Are you comfortable putting that out in the world versus your face or your voice? And just try to find the ways that you could bridge that chasm because if you don't tell anybody about it, they won't know what it is.
Yeah, so you have to find what's right for you. Absolutely. I think that's
Yeah.
interesting about drawing or communicating through, curation, music, whatever it is. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm interested about this. I'm really interested in this idea that children's books are difficult to self-publish. I'm like particularly interested in that because I get it from the standpoint that they tend to be illustrated and tactile, and they're for kids who we hope aren't on screens reading. So I get it, but I'm curious about, now with print on demand and like the print quality being like you can really go pretty high quality on self-published children's books. I'm interested in like, and I know we have a lot of children's books authors, potentially some on this call. What would be an example of that? Like, what about library or school communities? Like, do you see a path for these people in terms of promoting when they're self-published?
I think it's possible if they have the connections in a parent or school community, to find a way in there where you're pounding the pavement to talk to the people who will buy the book, which is parents or librarians. And I think there are fewer and fewer school librarians, which is even tougher for everybody. And I think the school route is even tougher without um, traditional publishing behind it, because they just don't want to do the legwork to vet everything, and they have to because
Mhm.
FAs is going to kids. But I know that librarians are much more open to all kinds of pathways for publishing and writing. So I think that could be, but again, you'd be going to talking to every district, every county or however it is, and that's difficult. But there are lots of ways to build community in parenting worlds, where you could interact with kids or parents really, because you're not talking to the kids, you're talking to
You're
the parents.
selling to parents.
Yeah,
Yeah.
until you get to YA. But I also think that it is a format-based issue because obvious like no one is reading full-size picture books on iPads to kids. Sometimes, yes, like, are we going to travel and we can get them on the yeah, I have read picture books like that to my kid on vacation when, we needed books. But no one's doing that regularly. Um at any scale. And then middle grade can get a little interesting. There is more screen adaption, Kindles and iPads, and my kid reads library books on their Kindle, on their iPad, and I'm fine with it in general. Like, I'd rather them read something on their iPad than watch something. But that is harder to do too, because it's just a bigger barrier to entry. And also the kids aren't buying those books. The kid has to pass it off to the grown up to hit buy. Even though a lot of kids are able to use library apps a little bit more freely. And that counts. That's good. So it's just kind of these barriers that don't exist in adult publishing that you have to take into consideration in children's publishing.
That's interesting. I'm sure it's also perhaps a little bit easier if you have a niche, like a particular interest area or a local book or a seasonal book where you
Yeah,
can kind of glom onto a community. But I really would love to see some innovation in that area. And by the way, just, bless our school librarians that are left.
I know.
Bless them. Okay, switching before we open it up to questions, switching from traditional to self and self to traditional. Which way is more common?
So,
Um,
ooh, you know, I don't know. I think these days it, it's much more common for it to happen both ways, where you can have a long trad career and something is not going as what you the way you want to, or you want to branch out, or your editor left, or all these things, and then you can't get another trad deal, or you don't want one. Maybe you're sick of them, which fair. And you go self-pub or hybrid. Um, and then I think there are a lot of people who are like, oh, I don't want to mess with any of that trad stuff. Who wants to wait for an agent to get back to you 6 months later? I'm going to go forth and decide, oh, wait, I don't actually want to be an expert in 27 ways. I want to go trad. I think that now, I think it's mo both ways more than so. But before, I think even
so
15
interesting.
years ago was more self to trad.
Have you experienced cases where agents and traditional publishers have been pursuing self-published authors and have not been able to tempt them into switching?
Yes. And that's happened to me. I have not done a lot of chasing of self-pub authors to just to like say, hey, let's go, let's try. You're so successful. Let's try it. Do you want a trad deal? Other agents have gotten there first, and I don't feel the need to like throw my hat in those rings. And I'm not close to previously self-published books at all. I'm just not doing the chasing, and other agents are, and I think that's great. Like great. I have a client who, in the heyday of um, coloring books for adults. So I couldn't think of the word. She had published something on Kindle, and when one of the very, very big first coloring books for adults went out of stock because Chronicle didn't order enough books, Amazon suggested her book, and it she was selling six figures copies. And I was introduced to her, or we found each other somehow, and I was able to sell her books internationally, but I couldn't get her a traditional deal that made her more money than her self-pub deal for these for coloring books. And I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna fight you. Like, I mean, but it wasn't a fight. But I was like, yeah, I totally agree. I cannot get you more money than you're making right now. You should not do that. And we did licensing and we did foreign. And it was great. It worked out for everybody.
Fantastic. I love it. That's a great move. International distribution. And, of course, now with the expansion of the self-publishing tech and platforms, Ingram Spark going international and Amazon you could probably, that story might be different today. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. And if you had some advice for a self-published author who does want to consider or is curious about maybe, in the past has tried and has had some success, and is looking to break into traditional publishing or has a particular idea and they came to you, what would you be looking for? What kind of platform? I know there's not like a magic number, but like what type of platform size like kind of gets you interested? Um, what type of, I know you said genre really matters, but anything you can share around sales data or even just like the idea, like what idea or has which idea has in the past kind of struck you as a like, yes, I am definitely interested in taking this client on.
I in a perfect world, I would love it if a self-published author who had success with a series or a single standalone book had a brand new, not self-published book to share with me that their current readers would also like. Not the second in a series, but close genre, same genre, something like that. And that's the best of all possible worlds to me personally, because I can say to a publisher, "Hey, this has had this amount of success," and I would say five figures in sales at least, um, because I and I haven't really been in a situation where it's been like, oh, this was like 2,000 copies short of what we would want. Like it's never really that granular. It's everything together. So it could be any number of a decent sales track record for a self-published book plus a robust Instagram or TikTok or something like that, or a lot of sales and a little TikTok, or a lot of TikTok and medium sales. Like it all of this is kind of considered together. And those are just two examples of things. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Um, and then I can say to them, and this new book that no one has seen before is fantastic, and everyone's going to love it. And like that's the best case scenario. The second best case scenario, just to me personally, and I don't think this is true for everybody, is a self-published book that did really well, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 copies. Um, and that is in a genre that is hot and moving. Um, and that a publisher wants to hitch their wagon to that. And of course, that's, yeah, everybody, yes, everybody would love to be in that situation. That would be the best possible situation. The situations that I don't have as much power or I can't do much for are the authors who say to me they want me to take them to the next level because there isn't always a next level. Sometimes when you have done everything right and you sell 3,000 copies of your paranormal romance, whatever we are calling it these days, um, that's it. That's what it would have sold traditionally too. And that would be great. Like 3,000 copies is fantastic, but it could also be 500 copies. And 500 copies or 150 copies are really all your book might have sold even in traditional. I mean, we hope not.
Totally.
But
Absolutely. The economics are just, yeah.
yeah.
One more follow on to this, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. Sabrina's asking, what is a robust social media following in terms of numbers? We'll turn to that in a minute, but my question's related. Do you, when you're sitting down and you're engaging with a potential client, or you see others doing this, publishers closely looking at an author platform, do you look at email list? And if, why do you think this is less, why do you think the email list is not as prominent of the factor as social following these days? I'm kind of asking a leading question because I think, and I have seen with Tertulia campaigns, how powerful email is at converting. And it's very interesting to me that it tends to follow the social following in importance. Any comment on that?
We can see the social following without asking you any questions, which is the number one way I think it makes a difference. It's because it's just right there in front of us. And then we can compare and contrast and be like, oh, this person's got 50,000, this firm's got 25. And we can't see your email list because it's yours and it's in your hands. And also the email list usually comes after the social following because otherwise, how do people know about you to sign up for your newsletter or whatever? Or how do you get those email addresses? And I don't suggest people buy them. I think that my newsletter got me this book deal specifically, and I did not have a bajillion subscribers. I had like 1,000. And no, not even, maybe even 700. And overall subscribers, I had like 15,000. And those are not huge, huge numbers. But I still was able to say, I'm going to get to these eyeballs every week, and I have a good reason for them to keep coming back to my site, and then they will also hopefully like the book. And so it you can just get all these names, but these email addresses or all these followers, but if you're not giving them anything, they don't have a reason to stay. And so I think that email lists are A plus great things that can really move the needle, but they're hard to get if you don't have the following, and nobody knows what they are until you tell them.
Okay, it's sort of a chicken and egg thing. It's like the
Mhm.
email's going to help you actually convert loyal people, but to get there, you need to lay down the groundwork. Social. Some people could do it. But yeah, and I think the tools, what Substack's done around discoverability and, and sort of just in general, the um, innovation in email tools has helped. But that's a great answer. Thank you. All right, we're going to open it up for questions. Corey Club had asked a question in the chat. Corey, do you want to unmute and ask your question? Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Thanks for all the information so far. Thanks, guys. So yeah, what's your advice on a previously published book where the writer regains rights and now wants to self-promote or self-publish? Is it worth it or is it a waste of time?
It would depend on how you can get to eyeballs. If you have no way to get to the readers, then it might not make much of a difference. But if you have other avenues to actually promote your book, then it can be a really great thing to do. It's again, it's not if you build it, they will come. How are you going to
Okay.
promote it is the most important question.
Yeah. Okay. So that kind of wraps back into what you're saying about social media, like, newsletters, social media, all those things are kind of like the triggers, if you will, of getting the word out, word of mouth type thing. So,
They're the lowest barrier to entry things that we have at our hands. So they're the first things people go to. There are lots of other ways to go, but they'll be very specialized for what you want to do. The way I've promoted this book is not the way I would promote a novel.
mm, okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, Corey. Shauna Gibson, are you still on the call? If you want to ask your question, I think it'd be relevant to a lot of people, even though you're asking particularly around children's books. Are you still there? Shauna Gibson. Okay, she asked, would you recommend a writer pitch one completed picture book to an agent, or do they need two? And I'm just going to put another layer on top of that, which is maybe you've developed somewhat of a following, either in social or in whatever community of interest you're in. Maybe you've had some success with self-publishing, and you're considering moving into, an agenting, seeking an agent and that whole process. You said query letters are better than ever. Let's like double click on that a little bit. What is the ultimate query letter, thing that really gets you? And I know that's a big question, but if you could kind of frame that, and then do you pay special attention when there are multiple books pitched and you see a series or sort of a long life with an author, or does that not necessarily factor into your get on your radar if it's just like one single standalone book and you think it's killer?
I can only sell one book at a time most of the time. Like sometimes there's a two book deal, sometimes there's a series deal. That's great, but I am sending one book out to an editor for them to consider if they can sell that book. So I'm personally focused on that first book we can sell together. I of course I would talk to a new client about what they want to do next, what does it look like, what do they want out of the world, but I also can't guarantee that they're like, well, I want to do a mystery and then a thriller and then and I'm like, okay, great, we'll try. Like maybe that will work for us. With picture books specifically, I do like just the one. And because it's just giving me more homework. It's like I'm reading two queries for this one query. And it's fine. If you've done that, then I think that's okay. But having multiple books to consider doesn't make me hungrier to sign somebody up. And in fact, when I see someone says like, "Oh, I'm on the ninth book of my 14 book series. Here are all of them," I get really I can't handle that. I can't read all nine of those books to decide if I want to be your agent. And maybe I don't have to, but that's just it's a lot to ask that I can't take on where I am in my career. Um, was there something else that I didn't get to? Oh, query
No,
letters. Yeah.
yeah.
Tell me about the book, folks. Tell me about the book. That's the number one thing I need you to do. There is no special, checklist. There's no sparks I want to see. I want to know happens in your book, who it's for, and why I should read it. You're not going to say, Kate, you should read it because I'm special and blah, blah, blah. But like, how would you pitch this book to your best friend if trying to get them to read it? How do you pitch the last book you read to your best friend to convince them to read it because you know they'll love it? That's how you're talking to me in a query letter. I do need to know the title, the genre, and the word count. That's three things. But honestly, the number one thing I need in a query letter is what the book is about and what happens in the book.
Okay, thank you. And you all can follow Kate because she has a lot of thoughts about this in her newsletter. So make sure that you subscribe. Ivan Scott, would you like to unmute and ask your question? I love this question. Are you still there?
I am here. Thank you so much for doing this, and it's great to meet you guys. Okay, so my question is, I'd like to get your thoughts on men writing rom-coms and romance and their chances of being published. Do men already have two strikes against them in this genre? And then some other thoughts were, I know that some women doubt a men writing romance since they would use graphic terms, not write the women with respect. Also, female protagonists, they would write them as they're going to give everything up for their man, their careers, their passion, all that, which it's to me that's not realistic, especially with my wife. She's a in marketing vice president, so it's like her career is everything, and I support her. So I write sweet rom-com Hallmark Channel romances, and I've always wondered, is it because I'm a man? I get the rejection. Should I use a female pen name? So I just want to get your thoughts on that.
I don't think I would use a female pen name. That feels
Okay.
more dishonest than not.
Mhm.
It's a good question.
You could use some initials. That's a long-standing tradition of,
Yeah.
obscuring gender. I think the proof is in the pudding. If the book is hitting all the right notes and the women are realistic and wonderful and the reader wants to spend their time with them and the romance is great and all that is happening and then that's what it is. And then that's good. If it's not, there could be lots of places where um that isn't happening in the book and it's going to be on a book by book basis. And there are going to be people who are like, I don't want to read that dude's book. You can't account for that. But I don't think there's no way to say, yes, this is happening to you, or yes, this is happening to most men. I don't approach that when I read romances. I did recently look at something that was like about a very specific struggle of motherhood that was written by a man. And I was like, and I read it and it was fine. But I think I would have felt the same way at the quality of that book if it was written by a woman. You know what I mean? And so it did give me pause for a second. And I was like, but if you could pull it off, you could pull it off. So I'd like to say that generally speaking, the world is not prejudiced against this in this way. There are people who will be like that. I would not just say never try again. Why would I? Like, you can keep trying.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate the answer. Maybe I'll send you a query one day if you're interested.
Yeah.
What do you think, Kate, about, do you guys think about the how the reader will perceive the gender of the author, or do you try to detach, separate that from your
Absolutely. We try to anticipate what the reader's going to think about all aspects of the authorship. Um, and just try to make a guess or try to look at past performance and say, oh, hey, I did send out a book last year from a person who was writing outside of their experience, and I thought it was fantastic. And he wasn't writing wholly outside of his experience, but some part of it. And we had editors come back and say, no, we can't do it because he's writing outside of his experience. And then we had other rejections that could have been both, or could have been anything. Um, but I did have a couple of editors say, yeah, because the readership is going to react to it, not because the publisher had a rule or something like that. And it didn't work. That doesn't mean I wouldn't try it again, but experience did not bear out in this case.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, thank you for that. I have some fun comments in the chat who everyone's enjoying you, Kate. Hook book and the Cook formula. Pitch like you're telling your best friend. Love it. All great advice. Dawn mentions Nicholas Sparks as romance writer. Great.
There's an exception to every rule, doesn't
Yep.
prove the rule.
And S.N. Sinclair, always with the good insights, says, she would never put away a book or pick up a book based on the writer's gender, but understands the question as authors like S.E. Hinton, J.K. Rowling with the initials had, second thoughts about going out as a female author. So it makes total sense. Sabrina, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, hi, thank you. Hi, Kate. I just would like to know, what do you consider a good social media following? Since you mentioned that earlier, like having a robust one. Yeah.
It
Thank you.
depends on genre. I hate to be the it depends person, but it really does. And it really depends on, and like in the market. Like I would look at some of the crafters that I look at, and 15,000 followers on Instagram can be just what you need. And I think that in romantasy, that number would be higher. And in cooking or food or wellness or parenting or any of those practical nonfiction things, it would be even higher. So I am sorry to say I don't have a number for you. I do like five figures more than, I start if someone has 25,000 followers on Instagram, I'm like, "Oh, cool. That's a start. That's good." But I wouldn't say that, "Oh, well, you're at 23, so you have no chance." Like it's just much more fluid than that than to have a single number that works.
Okay, thank you.
Kate, I'm going to squeak in a question. When you're writing about a topic that is extremely timely, so current events, politics, technology, the traditional publishing cycle is not very friendly to that. What are you seeing change in the traditional publishing industry to address that as our cycles of change in life and society are so tight? And or could you imagine that more journalists, for instance, who might own their own platforms or policy people who have a community of interest and followers move into self-publishing in order to be able to short circuit that long timeline?
I bet you they will if they haven't already. I think that there is a certain amount of prestige that maybe policy people, journalists, et cetera, that would want to have behind them with a trad published book. I think that still means something in those areas where it doesn't mean as much in fiction genres. And so that might be holding them back to be like, no one's going to take me seriously because in those neighborhoods, they still feel that way, while people do not feel that way in other genres. Um, what I don't think is going to happen is have publishing speed up, traditional publishing speed up, because it is extremely taxing. And we don't have the employee base to deal with that. What can happen is called crashing a book, where the manuscript is done very quickly, it's copy edited very quickly, it's edited, and it can happen like 6 months, and that just exhausts everybody. Not to mention that doesn't include time that the book actually is printed and then shipped somewhere, and if it has to come from overseas because it's for color, that's a whole nother deal. So I don't think that we will speed up to meet self-publishing's flexibility, um, because it's too taxing and it will cost too much money to hire the people to do it. But I also think that the way that traditional publishing looks, and self too, but um, we actually want the book to be around for a long time. And so if it is so timely that it is only relevant at this one moment in time, it might not be a very good book because it's only going to be it's about this minute, and we want it to be about this hour and this year and this era. And so I think that publishing in reaction to the timeliness issue is to pass on things that are too timely, because we don't know if anybody's going to care about it in 2 years.
I sat on a panel recently with some editors in traditional publishing houses, and they said that the test is always, is this a book or is this an article?
Yep.
And
Yep.
more often than not, it is an article. So
Yeah.
that makes sense. I do think, though, that there's probably some interesting ways that your intellectual property that you've developed, whether that's the research you've done, the reporting that's left on the cutting floor, your voice, your special take on the AI revolution or the war, whatever it is, does deserve, I mean, I think you deserve to, in a world where it's harder than ever to make a living as a journalist, to be able to monetize that,
Hmm.
to support yourself. And I think long form content in the form of books is an interesting opportunity. So, partly why I'm, personally interested in that question. Okay. I'm going to bring Dawn in here just because, Dawn, if you want to unmute, I can't believe we haven't had any more questions come up on AI. Do you want to ask your question aloud, Dawn? Are you still there?
Sure, sure. Excuse me. Kate, thank you very much, by the way. This is a very good presentation here. But I've been reading a great deal of fear that writers have these days regarding, for lack of a better word, witch hunts regarding AI. And the fear that, if they publish something or send something to an agent or to a publisher, they're going to go through the text to see if AI was used or not used. And I think there's a big debate about whether AI monitors are effective or not. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I assume innocence first. I'm not running anybody's queries through an AI detector. I feel like I have read AI generated queries and I can tell pretty quickly, and they're usually eh, bad. So I wouldn't want them anyway. And so I haven't gotten farther than that. I have not been in a situation where I suspected an author had used AI to create the content. a generative AI situation. And I haven't been in a situation where someone has accused one of my authors of doing that. So I think that this is a lot of, I don't want to say fear mongering, but I think it's a lot of posts on a lot of social media to create a lot of scare and not a lot of it actually happening in real life. I know that there have been some widely publicized cases. There was that one out of Hachette in the UK, but I'm not hearing that every day from editors. I'm not hearing that in meetings. I'm not hearing that. Um, it's just a couple of sensational cases. And so it's good to note that when you sign a book contract with a traditional publisher, you are signing that you promise you haven't used generative AI and that if you have, you will disclose it. And so if you do that and you don't disclose it, you could be in breach of your contract and owe all the money back. So I think that is enough of a barrier than the fear of it.
Thank you. That's super grounding, helpful answer. Okay, we're going to take a quick one and a long one from the chat, and then I'm going to get the moderator's privilege with the last question. How much does an agent charge these days? Robert asks.
15% domestically, sometimes 20 to 21% internationally, depending on how they split it with their co-agents. Because usually in some Asian countries, it's me, my co-agent, and then another co-agent. And so we each get 7%, and that's 21. But generally, if it's me and a co-agent, we split 20% internationally, but traditionally, domestically, 15%.
Great, thank you. And then we're going to zoom out and we're going to ask the hard question. Corey Club asks, where do you see publishing going in the next 5 years? Any big macro trends you want to share with us?
5 years is a blip in time when it comes to publishing. I do think in 5 years we'll have less romantasy. I think that it will not be as a huge market share as it is right now. I think in publishing, the books that are in process are the ones that are in process. And I don't think that in traditional publishing, we're very hungry in the same way we were 3 years ago for big romantasy titles. I personally am trying to make space opera, like science fiction, Star Trek stuff be the next big thing. So that's my personal goal, but I only have so much power and I can just send out so many books. Other than that, I don't think we can tell, and I don't think we've ever been able to tell. And publishing is a reactive industry. And we get lucky and then we follow that luck. And then we get lucky again and we follow that luck. And it is very unscientific. And I'm okay with that. It doesn't make more money for anybody. But I don't think that we can optimize creativity in that way. Because as a person, as a reader, I don't want to be told what to read. And I have only have the choices in front of me. But I think everybody feels that way. And we want to feel like we're making our own discoveries. And I think we, as publishing people, know that that is really what is at the heart. And we just got to try a bunch of stuff and see what happens.
Yeah, it does seem that there can be diminishing. I love that idea of optimizing creativity. It's like there's going to be diminishing returns if you just continue to go deeper and deeper into the romantasy subgenre, and then you reach it's not a bottomless well of good quality. So I totally see that. Um,
And I'll say just one thing too is like I know that all of my answers today have been it depends. And oh, you had said something earlier about it too. And but that really is the answer in so many ways. And that the hunt for this very specific uh, order of operations or whatever is not fruitless, but it's not the answer. And so you do have to kind of figure it out as you go along. And that's what everybody is doing. And so you're not doing it wrong if you're doing it that way. You've got to react to what you have done and what readers are doing with you and see how it works.
well, you've kind of just answered my last question, which was about advice. Um, do you think that there's any sort of like overrated advice where people say you have to do this, and in fact, it does depend? Like, what do you see as the sort of overrated or sort of myths?
I I think that one of the things that I wish people would not necessarily say to people is um, you deserve a book deal. Your story deserves to be told. Because that's not how we buy books. And we're talking about a retail industry. We're not talking about an emotional, empathetic, personal connection. I deserve to give you respect if you were telling me your story person to person, but I don't deserve to give you $30 because something monumentous happened to you. And so I try to get away as far away as I can from deserve. And it's not fun because it's like every time I go into like the memoir genre is very, very hard where you have to say, I'm sorry that something very bad happened to you, but no one's going to give you money to hear about it. And that's the worst. I don't say that directly, obviously, but sometimes that's the undercurrent, and that's just it because we are talking about capitalism. We are not talking about human empathy. So the you should write a book about that is like kind of the worst advice because the person is coming to that from an empathy point of view and not a capitalism point of view. And so, unfortunately, listen to the capitalists. I don't like saying it as much as most people like hearing it. But we're talking about a retail industry. We're not talking about human connection.
You're
And so,
taking that experience into a unit to be sold, and that's the long and short of it. Yeah.
yeah, it sucks, but that's what I kind of want people to take into consideration when they're thinking about selling a book or selling a book.
Thank you, Kate. I see a lot of love in the chat. People really got a lot out of hearing your advice, your insights, your own personal experience, which you've been so generous to share with us. Hold up your picture book that's coming out on Tuesday and your Right Through It book, which you
It's
can see
right
behind
there.
her.
Right
Great
there.
title. Pay attention to me.
Yes,
Love it.
he's a
Great
very
title.
cute cat. His name is Edgar, and
Oh, he looks,
he wants he wants all the attention in the world. Okay.
oh, I love it. Who can resist the irresistible blue cat?
I I know. I don't
Let's
even
give
have
it to
one.
them. Let's give it to them.
We-
Thank you so much, Kate. It was wonderful talking to you for office hours. We hope you'll come back in the future
All
and
right.
good luck with your book launch. Have a
Bye.
wonderful weekend, everybody.